My parents laughed when I cried in pain of brain cancer. So Grandma cut them from her will. 2 years later, they came begging for forgiveness. Hi there everybody, Patrick is my name. I am currently 32 years old and employed as a sales director for a Chicago-based furniture firm. I currently live in a 3-bedroom apartment in Lincoln Park, a peaceful neighborhood with tree-lined streets, with my wife Emma and our 9-month-old daughter, Ingrid. We spend our evenings with Ingrid and concentrate on our business during the week. On weekends, when work isn't too busy, our small family usually makes the trip to see Grandma Carol. About 30 minutes away from us, she resides in a comfortable home in Oak Park. When Grandma holds Ingrid in her arms and sings old lullabies quietly, it always makes me feel at ease. Right now, our lives are genuinely serene and tranquil. And I cherish every second I spend with my closest loved ones. Since I nearly lost everything just 2 years ago. My life wasn't the only thing at risk at that pivotal moment. It also revealed my family members' actual selves. Following that, my sister Katie, my parents and I lost any sense of connection and became strangers while having the same blood. Throughout it all, I came to understand that a true family is not defined by DNA. It is characterized by the people who support you during your most trying times. A little more than 2 years ago, in May 2023, the incident that altered my life took place. Emma and I had only been married for 3 months at that point. We were still in the honeymoon stage of our marriage, where every day was full of laughing and future dreams, even after dating for almost 5 years and being completely in love. After getting married in a little church outside of Chicago in the spring, we began to dream of starting a family. Emma would talk about how she wanted to decorate the nursery, and I would imagine myself in Lincoln Park, teaching our children how to ride a bike. We had even begun setting away finances for children that never existed to attend college. Then suddenly, a storm struck. All of our lovely plans were swept away in a single, tragic instant. It was a May Saturday. Emma and I were watching The Godfather together on the couch. Suddenly, like a bullet, a sharp, severe ache pierced my brain. As soon as I cried, I began to convulse uncontrollably. I saw Emma's frightened face just before everything turned black. Something was shouting from her mouth, but I couldn't hear it. After that, everything turned dark. I had to squint when I opened my eyes due to the hospital's glaring bright lights. It felt like someone was hammering inside my skull. I became aware that I was lying in a hospital room with medical equipment all about me as I looked around. Emma was sitting on a chair next to my bed, her eyes puffy and red from sobbing. She seized my hand as soon as she realized I was conscious and uttered my name in a shaky voice. "You're awake, Patrick. God be praised." When I asked her to explain what had happened a short while later, she simply shook her head and sobbed even more. She finally broke the quiet when I persisted. Emotion suffocated her voice. "Patrick, you have severe brain cancer." My ears began to ring as soon as Emma pronounced those words. The surroundings became hazy and seemed far away. What I was hearing was unbelievable. Aggressive brain cancer in a person aged 30. It meant I wouldn't have much time left to love Emma, pursue my goals, and lead the life I had just begun to construct while life was only getting begun. I cried like a child for the first time in my life as I lay there in that special care unit. If I disappeared, I pondered what would happen to Emma. I reflected about my aspirations and desires that might never materialize. However, confronting death head-on was the most horrifying aspect. I never thought it would happen so quickly. The door to my hospital room opened as I was still engulfed in gloomy thoughts, and a man in his early 50s named Dr. Peterson entered with a large pile of medical records. He turned to me and spoke in a steady, calm voice after examining the readings on the machines surrounding me. "I'm going to be honest with you, Patrick. If you consent to our experimental treatment program, you can still live." At those remarks, a glimmer of hope appeared in my eyes, but Dr. Peterson went on before I could allow myself to feel relief. "But even for the first round of treatment, the price is high. $1,350. Because it is still in the experimental stage, insurance companies will not cover it." Emma's voice was tremulous as soon as that giant figure was out of his mouth. "Is there anything else we can do if we don't have the entire $350,000? Dr. Peterson hesitated, clearly uneasy. We were silent for a few seconds before he gave us a direct response. "Palliative care is all we could provide. As a result, Patrick would be kept as comfortable as possible, but his time will be limited. He has no more than 3 months to live, according to current estimations." When I heard 3 months ago, I felt a new wave of anxiety sweep over me. The fact that death occurs isn't the most terrifying aspect of it. It's anticipating when it will occur. Following Doctor, the room was silent as Peterson exited. Emma's sobbing next to me and the heart monitor's constant beeping were all that was left. I suddenly knew that $350,000 was the number that now determined my survival. A life or death figure that is overwhelming. That night, none of us was able to get any sleep at all. Faint, moving patterns were produced on the white walls by the hallway light that filtered through the crevice beneath the hospital door. Emma was sitting next to my bed, gazing up at the ceiling as though she was looking for answers. She spoke abruptly and resolutely in the midst of the silence. "Sell the apartment, please. I've already calculated it. We've saved up another $150,000. If we sell the property, we could receive at least an additional $500,000. For your treatment, that would be more than sufficient." I sighed and gave a small shake of my head. I remained silent in answer. Emma finally fell asleep at 11 p.m., due to sheer tiredness. My mind was racing with contradicting ideas as I lay awake in the dark. I kept wondering if it was worth it to continue the treatment. $350,000 is a huge sum of money. During those calm times, I had a selfish idea. Perhaps it would have been preferable to use that money for Emma's future. Perhaps she could utilize it to start over and rediscover happiness. She wouldn't have a place to live if we sold the apartment, only memories and medical debt. Emma woke up abruptly around midnight, as though she had been shaken. I was still awake when she turned to look at me, asking, "What's wrong?" I hesitated for a few seconds before answering in a hoarse voice, "Why aren't you sleeping?" Emma sat up straight and her eyes widened in fear when she heard the words, "I've decided not to go through with the treatment." She yelled out in desperation and started to sob. "I'll be dead before you if you quit treatment." It broke me to bits to see the lady I loved sob like that. I came to the realization that love sometimes necessitates fighting, even when the chances are slim. I realized I had just made the most important decision of my life, one that could alter our lives in ways we could never have imagined. So I nodded and said to her in a whisper, "All right. I'll do the treatment. We'll go through this together." Dr. Peterson allowed us to leave the hospital for a short time the following morning, but not before issuing a strong warning. "Patrick, you must return right away if you have any strange symptoms, including seizures, nausea, or excruciating headaches. Time is of the essence." I knew I was walking a tightrope every day after hearing those words, and it sent a shiver down my spine. Back at the flat, we started making plans to raise the $350,000 we required. I initially called Ryan Williams, my best buddy since college, now working as a real estate agent. There was stillness on the line when I told him everything. Then he spoke in a calm, determined voice. "Don't worry about selling the apartment, Patrick. I will handle everything. You won't be charged a commission by me." I felt a sudden warmth when Ryan said it to me. Having a friend like him was perhaps the best thing I've ever done. However, what followed astounded me even more. Ryan deposited $50,000 into my account very far away. It was an interest-free loan, he said. I could reimburse him once I was well. I said to Ryan, "Aren't you afraid you'll never get the money back?" "I could die at any time." He responded right away in a firm voice. "Emma and you have my faith. You're the best man I know, Patrick." My chest was constricted with emotion when I hung up the phone. I at last realized what true friendship meant at my saddest period. Emma didn't waste time at all. She informed her folks about my illness over the phone in Milwaukee. With the speaker on, I could hear her mother sobbing on the other end of the line. "Don't worry, sweetheart," Emma's parents told her once she calmed down. Even Emma's younger sister, Grace, who had just graduated and begun working a few months prior, called us in a tremulous voice and said, "Emma, I just emptied my savings. We're going to assist Patrick. We'll lend you $100,000. I have $15,000. Please take it to help Patrick." Grace was a young woman just starting out in life, and seeing her say that made Emma and I cry uncontrollably. Nevertheless, she was prepared to donate everything she owned in order to support her brother-in-law, whom she had only known for a few years. After calculating our financial situation, we had $315,000, but we were still short of $35,000. At that point, I thought of my parents, who had recently sold a plot of land in the Chicago suburbs for $320,000, and hoped they would still have the funds and be willing to assist me during this dire situation. I grabbed Emma's hand without hesitation and said, "Let's head to my parents' house. They'll assist us." Emma nodded and hurried over to join me as we got into the car and drove over, not realizing that what was about to happen would turn out to be one of the most memorable experiences of my life. I arrived at my parents' house around 5 p.m. As I pulled up to the curb, I noticed Katie's red car was parked in front. That was a clear sign the whole family was home. Emma squeezed my hand tightly as we stepped up the familiar front steps. She knew my relationship with my family had never been easy, but at that moment, we needed every bit of help we could get. After a few greetings, I sat down across from them and started explaining everything about the seizure, the diagnosis of aggressive brain cancer, and the fact that I had only 3 months left if I didn't start treatment. As I spoke, I kept thinking my mom, Linda, Steve, and my dad were sitting on the couch watching the news, and Katie was tapping away on her laptop at the dining table. They all turned to look at us, surprised. My dad was the first to speak, and he looked at me sternly and said, "I told you you should have been more active." I was startled that he would bury his face in his hands when he thought of his son running out of time. But their reactions left me speechless. Now you see what occurs when you don't care for your health. His words hit me like a slap across the face. This wasn't the time for blame or judgment. Then my mom shook her head and said in a cold, flat voice, "Don't worry. Medicine has advanced significantly. They'll make it right. You're a man. Be resilient. You're not a child." After a quick look up, Katie replied coldly, "You still have 3 months left. Simply use your time however you see fit." I felt as though the earth had been torn from under me by their icy, uncaring answers. I was standing there among blood relatives who didn't seem to care if I lived or died. I immediately stood up and grabbed Emma's hand to escape, but she softly drew me back and said in a whisper, "We need them." I hesitated for a few seconds and struggled with myself, but then I took a big breath, turned to face my dad and said, "I'm only $35,000 short of what I need for treatment. Mom and you could help me with that." The moment I mentioned borrowing money, all 3 of their expressions shifted. They looked at each other with uncomfortable, almost irritated glances. No one said a word. The room went quiet, so quiet it felt suffocating. About a minute passed before my dad finally spoke, his voice hard and unyielding. "We don't have the money." "Didn't you just sell the land outside the city for $320,000? I asked him in shock. My mother jumped in this time, glancing at us and declaring, "That money is for Katie's house. We have already made the deposit. Next week the remainder is due." It was as if someone had stabbed me in the chest when I heard those words. The golden child, Katie, came first once more. They have always made every choice with her in mind. And now, they still choose her, even though I was looking death in the face. Emma intervened when she saw the destruction on my face and begged, "Please give it to us for a week." My dad looked at me for a few seconds and then shook his head firmly, so I knew I had one final card to play. "When you need it, we'll pay it back right away. We're borrowing from other people. We'll have the money soon. Patrick needs treatment as soon as possible." "Let's borrow it with interest if you won't lend it for free," I murmured, glancing at him. He simply shook his head and said icily, "If you die, who should I get the money from?" "I'll pay you whatever the bank charges." That cruel question lit a fire in me. I couldn't hold it in anymore. I exploded. "Dad, I'm your kid." Emma was shaking next to me when he yelled back, emotionless, "I don't invest in someone who's already dying." The room fell silent, tense enough to choke. Katie then said, in her typical cold tone, "Don't you two still have an apartment?" "We're already putting it on the market, but it takes time," I said, trying to remain composed. I felt my blood boil when Katie said, "If you're willing to put it up as collateral for a $35,000 loan, then I'll lend you the money." After a few seconds, Katie smiled coldly and said, "If you're willing to put it up as collateral for a $35,000 loan, then I'll lend you the money." Our apartment was worth over $500,000, and she wanted to take it as collateral for just $35,000 to take advantage of me in my time of greatest need. When Emma saw my condition, she hurried to help me up and said firmly, "We're leaving." Before leaving, she turned back, locked eyes with the 3 of them, and said in a voice like ice, "Don't forget what you did to Patrick today." The anger and stress caused a blinding headache, forcing me to sit down and grip my skull as if 1,000 needles were sticking into my brain. "You'll pay for it one day." As my condition worsened, Emma escorted me out of the place I used to call home and drove directly to the hospital. How had I survived all these years in a family where love had always been measured in dollars? I asked myself as I sat in the passenger seat. I was unable to get any sleep at all that night while I was lying in my hospital room. Emma had fallen asleep next to me from sheer exhaustion, but I lay there restless, my mind racing with 1,000 questions, wondering why I was treated that way, why Katie was always given priority, and why, even in a situation where it was life or death, those questions kept coming back to me, keeping me awake. I began thinking about my early years, when I used to play with hand-me-downs while Katie always had the newest toys. She attended a private school with piano lessons, ballet classes, tennis programs, you name it, while I attended a public school and was denied access to extracurricular activities. Her birthdays were lavish celebrations with cakes and large groups of friends, while mine were simply quiet family dinners. By the time we got to college, the imbalance became impossible to ignore. My parents paid Katie's full tuition and living expenses. I had to earn a scholarship and work 3 jobs to afford tuition and rent. After graduation, I built my life from scratch, bought my car, bought my own home, built a career with nothing but grit and hard work. All of my accomplishments were the result of my sacrifice and sweat. In the meantime, Katie received financial support at every turn, from her first car to her failed business venture. My parents were always there to support her when she fell, and they continued to do so even as I was dying. The bitter realization that, despite everything I had done for them over the years, they still turned their backs on me was more painful than their coldness that day. I recalled how, in 2020, Katie was unemployed for 8 months after the marketing firm she worked for failed, and I was saving to buy our apartment at the time. However, I didn't hesitate when my parents told me about their predicament. I sent Katie $2,000 to help her get by. I paid the $3,000 bill to have my parents' roof repaired after a storm damaged it in 2018. I gave my dad $5,000 toward a new car in 2022 when he wanted to replace his beat-up Honda Accord that had accumulated over 200,000 miles. And in October of that same year, my mom was hospitalized for 2 weeks due to kidney stones. I never mentioned that it was a loan. I never asked for anything in return. I just contributed because that's what family is supposed to do, and I sent her $1,000 to help with the hospital bills, and that doesn't even include the many little moments, holidays, birthdays, and unforeseen situations. I gave freely and without expecting anything in return. But Katie did nothing but take. She never gave anyone anything. She was like a money vacuum, always ready with an excuse to ask for help from me or our parents, but they always picked her first. Katie was the first to be considered in every big decision. Even though I only had 3 months to live, they still chose her in the face of my death, helping her purchase a home rather than supporting their son in his battle for survival. In that moment of intense rage and heartbreak, the idea that I might not even be their biological son struck me so strongly that I nearly wanted to have a DNA test to find out the truth. I promised myself that I would do whatever it took to get through this. The following morning, at around 9 a.m., Dr. Peterson had just finished checking my vitals and left the room after looking at Emma, who was still sleeping next to me with tear streaks dried on her cheeks. A few seconds later, the door opened again, and I assumed the doctor had forgotten something and was returning, but I was shocked to see Grandma Carol, who was 78 at the time, with her white hair pulled back neatly, and her eyes still bright and alive. At a time when I felt like the world had abandoned me, my grandmother, the one person I knew would never leave me, appeared out of nowhere, wearing her well-known navy blue knit cardigan and the polished black Oxfords she always liked. She wasted no time in asking how I was feeling. "This is $35,000. She remarked calmly but resolutely, looking directly into Emma's eyes as she strode firmly toward Emma and me, taking out 4 thick stacks of $100 bills from her ancient leather handbag, neatly packed and tied securely. Proceed to cover Patrick's medical expenses." Grandma sat down on the plastic chair beside my hospital bed after Emma hurriedly got up, her hands shaking as she accepted the money, bowed her head in appreciation, thanked Grandma, and hurried out of the room to make the payment, leaving me alone with the woman who had just changed everything. After a few moments of silence, I asked her, "Curious, Grandma, did Emma call you?" That old reassuring touch almost made me cry as she stroked her hand through my hair just like she used to do when I was a child. "Emma contacted me last night. I know everything and don't blame her. I warned her long ago that if something terrible ever happened, she should call me right away." She gave me a tender, loving look and responded. When she said that, I felt so grateful for Emma because she knew exactly what to do when it seemed like there was no hope left. Grandma was always there for us when we needed her most. In the hospital room, Grandma asked me about my condition and the treatment plan, and she reminded me to fight with all of my strength to overcome this illness. Before she left, she turned to me and said, "Don't sell the apartment. Don't lose it." She didn't give me a lengthy explanation, but instead looked directly into my eyes and said, "Focus on getting better." Her request caught me off guard, and I looked at her in surprise and said, "If I don't sell the apartment, I won't have enough money to pay everyone back. I'll take care of the cash." My grandma, who had always been rigorous and no nonsense, had just given me a promise, and if there's one thing I've learned about her, it's that when she made a commitment, she would never betray it. At that moment, a flood of hope and deep thankfulness swept over me. I contacted Ryan right away after she left and told him to wait to sell the apartment. I've made the decision not to proceed. I finally felt like I wasn't battling alone after everything that had transpired. Grandma Carol's unwavering devotion was now a strong ally in my fight against the illness. I was admitted to the experimental therapy program right away once I received the $350,000 advance payment. I watched bags of chemotherapy medication slowly seep into my veins as I lay in the hospital bed on the first day of treatment. I had the impression that I was risking everything on a shaky hope. The initial days were absolutely terrible. The experimental chemotherapy was twice as strong as the usual amount, and I felt so sick that I was unable to eat. My weight decreased from 165 pounds to just 132 pounds, and my hair fell out in big clumps. My entire body shook on several nights when I had a high temperature. Emma spent not a single day outside of the hospital. She tenderly wiped the cold perspiration from my forehead while she stayed up all night when I was in anguish. In moments when I felt hopeless and wanted to give up, Emma would grasp my hand tightly and whisper, "You have to fight. I need you to stay with me." It was Emma's words that gave me the strength to keep fighting this cancer. In the 4th week of the initial course of treatment, a miracle occurred. Dr. Peterson smiled broadly as he walked into the room for a standard examination. I hadn't seen that since I'd first met him. After reviewing the MRI data, Dr. Peterson informed us, "Patrick, I have good news. The tumor has shrunk by 40% compared to the original size. This result is beyond what we hoped for." Emma became very happy and started crying. As for me, it felt like I had just been granted a second chance at life. I was finally able to glimpse the end of the tunnel after spending so many days in a state of hopelessness. My blood test results revealed a notable decrease in cancer indicators by the 6th week. I was even allowed to take walks outside by Dr. Peterson. A real miracle occurred by the 7th week. The tumor has decreased by 70%, according to the most recent MRI. I knew that my risky choice to participate in the trial had saved my life, and the love and support of those around me had given me the strength to get through my darkest days. Dr. Peterson couldn't contain his excitement as he declared, "Patrick, this is one of the most successful cases I've ever seen with this experimental drug." I formally finished the first cycle of treatment 2 months later, with outcomes that greatly above my expectations. Emma and I expressed our gratitude to everyone who supported us throughout the most trying weeks after we were released from the hospital. In order to see Emma's parents, we took a car to Milwaukee. Emma's parents were ecstatic when they saw me return home looking well and putting on a little weight. Her mother gave me a tight hug and said, "Thank God Patrick's better," in a tremulous voice. They and Emma's younger sister Grace have been coming to see me in the hospital on a regular basis for the past 2 months. They arrived each week with genuine encouragement. I felt very fortunate to have a true family after witnessing their concern. On the other hand, neither my sister Katie nor my parents paid us a single visit. During the entire 2 months of treatment, they never contacted or even sent a single message to check on me. How little or much I meant to them was evident from their silence. Emma later informed me that my grandma was reprimanded by my dad for giving me the $35,000. Grandma Carol said bluntly to them at the time, "It's my money. I'll give it to whoever I want." I laughed, but I was also moved by her statement. I also wanted to express my gratitude to my best friend Ryan, who helped me out when I needed it most. When I brought up paying him back the $50,000, Ryan shook his head and said, "Don't worry about that. Just focus on getting better." His action reminded me once again of the actual value of genuine friendship. We thanked Ryan and then proceeded to see Grandma Carol. When she saw that I was healthy again, her wrinkly face brightened up with delight. She brushed my hair gently and said, "You're strong, Patrick. I'm proud of you." I also contacted Aunt Olivia to express my gratitude for coming to see me in the hospital a few times, despite the fact that she lived in Milwaukee and had to make the long drive. Grandma abruptly urged us to stay that afternoon as we were about to go. Then she grabbed her phone and called Aunt Olivia and my dad, demanding that they see her the following morning. She spoke in a forceful voice over the phone. "I will arrive at my house at 9 a.m. tomorrow. I wish to make amendments to my will." Grandma's abrupt choice caught me off guard, but since I knew how she felt, I dared not challenge it. To assist me recover, Mom prepared a large meal that night that included roasted meat, chicken soup and baked bread. Emma spent about 3 hours with her in the kitchen. They took extra care when preparing the food. The warm, inviting ambiance of Grandma's tiny house made me feel incredibly thankful. My situation might have deteriorated, and I might not even be here today if she hadn't intervened with that $35,000 just when I needed it. After months of anxiety and fear, I finally slept peacefully that night for the first time in a long time. At 9 a.m. the following day, the doorbell kept ringing. As one party after another entered Grandma's tiny home, the living room quickly filled up. My sister Katie and my dad were all taken aback when they noticed me sitting next to Grandma. They had expressionless, icy faces. Not even a hello word. They were still bitter over Grandma giving me the $35,000, and I could sense it. Neither did I intend to greet them. We were strangers in the same room after everything that had transpired. In contrast, Aunt Olivia's family was quite different. "Patrick," she said cheerfully, "I'm so glad to see you getting better. You've got to stay strong for the next 2 rounds of treatment." "Okay," she answered as soon as she saw me, and I thanked her and vowed to keep fighting. Around 9:10, the doorbell rang once more, and a tall man with a leather briefcase and a black suit, likely in his mid-40s, came in. Grandma took him inside and presented him to everyone. "This is my lawyer, Nicholas Parker." Attorney Nicholas nodded courteously to everyone before taking a seat in the chair that Grandma had indicated. Grandma abruptly turned to my father after everyone had taken their seats and said, "Steve, tell me something. Have I ever played favorites between you and Olivia?" Her abrupt remark made my father pause for a few seconds, as he was obviously taken by surprise. Grandma nodded as he finally said, "No, Mom. You've always treated us equally." She then asked another question. "Then why have you given Patrick and Katie preference?" My father's face went white at that point, but he made an effort to remain calm and answered, "I haven't favored anyone. I've always treated both kids fairly." Before he could say anything more, Grandma yelled, "Shut your mouth." Her voice sounded like a thunderclap throughout the room. There was utter silence. Everyone was afraid to move. "Clearly and deliberately, you left Patrick to die and used all $320,000 to buy Katie a house, and now you have the nerve to deny it," she said after pausing for a few seconds to gather herself. My mother then jumped in to defend my father, but she pointed out that Patrick is a boy, stronger, and capable of taking care of himself. Grandma stared straight at my dad and yelled, "I've been waiting for that exact sentence for a long time." We were all in shock, and no one yet knew what she meant. Grandma's laugh was bitter and frigid, but it was also full of significance. She turned to lawyer Nicholas a few moments later and said, "Nicholas, adjust the will for me. This house will go to Olivia after I pass away." My father froze, then yelled in shock, "Mom, you can't do this." Grandma was now really upset, and she got up and responded firmly and clearly. "Your wife just said Patrick is a stronger boy who can care for himself. Well, I also have 2 children, Steve and Olivia. Steve is a boy. He can take care of himself too." With those comments, I fully realized what Grandma was doing. This was her method of teaching my parents a lesson about fairness. My father didn't dare dispute. After glaring at my mother, he went to face Grandma and begged, "Mom, we were wrong. Please pardon us." But Granny remained unflinching despite their entreaties. "It's done. Take your wife and daughter and leave this house. If you don't, never call me Mom again and I'll call the police," she added forcefully, looking directly at my father. My mother looked to want to quarrel more, but my father indicated for her to stop. He was aware that once Grandma made up her mind, it couldn't be changed. In the end, the 3 of them departed the house in embarrassment and quiet. "Mom, I don't want Steve's share of the estate," Aunt Olivia whispered to Grandma after the sound of their automobile engine subsided. Grandma smiled gently and said, "Patrick already has a different share." She then took a checkbook out of the drawer, scribbled down a number, and gave me the check. "Give it to Patrick instead. This is for your treatment of me. Take it and pay off all your debts." Emma and I were too shocked to talk when I grabbed the check out of her hand. It stated $800,000, an astounding quantity we could never have imagined. As I tried to reject it, stunned by how much it was, Grandma stretched out and said, "Take it. You deserve this." Knowing there was no point fighting with her, we received the present with a thrill that words couldn't adequately explain. We cooked together and had a heartfelt supper with Aunt Olivia's family that day, who were the ones who made us feel like family. I came to the realization that family isn't based on blood. Amid the warmth of that evening, it's decided by the people who decide to always be there for you. I promptly repaid all of the money I had borrowed from my in-laws, sister-in-law Grace, and best buddy Ryan after getting the $800,000 from Grandma. I offered to give them some interest as a token of appreciation for their assistance, but they all flatly refused. It was never a loan, Emma's parents made plain. "She lent me the money out of love, not as a business deal," Grace added, laughing. Even the $5,000 in interest I had computed was rejected by Ryan, who insisted that friendship has not a monetary value. Their deeds made me aware of a profound reality. A person is not considered family just because they share blood or DNA. The folks that support you throughout your darkest moments without expecting anything in return are your true family. I felt more certain that I could pay for the final 2 rounds of treatment with the money my grandmother handed me. However, the happiness was short-lived. There was trouble not far behind. My father unintentionally learned about the substantial amount my grandmother had given me during a dispute with Aunt Olivia regarding the house's legacy. Aunt Olivia contacted me that same day and gave me the entire tale while sounding apologetic. She had been called by my father to relinquish her claim to the house. Additionally, she had yelled at him in the heat of the moment and unintentionally revealed the $800,000. She apologized over the phone as soon as she realized her error and advised me to exercise caution. 2 days later, during my second round of treatment, my parents and Katie arrived at the hospital, just as she had prophesied. They insisted that I divide the money equally among the family, claiming that since it was from Grandma, everyone was entitled to it. Seeing how agitated I grew, Emma immediately called hospital security to have them removed. She didn't stop there though. On my behalf, she also submitted a restraining order application. After we presented the complete narrative, from their reluctance to aid when I was on the brink of death to their harassment during treatment, the court authorized our motion. For the remainder of my life, I was legally barred from communication with my parents and sister, Katie. I felt as though a burden had finally been removed off my shoulders on the day I received the court's formal documentation. I was free of those who claimed to be my family but had only ever caused me suffering. After I finished my last course of treatment 3 months later, Doctor, I had never heard better news in my life than what Peterson gave me. I had no cancer whatsoever. Grandma honored the occasion by throwing a little celebration at her house after learning the news. She made a cake with the words, "Welcome back to life, Patrick," inscribed across the top and used yellow streamers, the color of hope, to decorate the living room. I invited Aunt Olivia and her family, Ryan, and Emma's family to come. I was overcome with emotion when I saw everyone who had supported me during my worst moments assembled in that tiny space. I talked in a stifled voice while standing alongside my loved ones. I am aware that words of appreciation will never adequately convey how grateful I am. I have the opportunity to continue living and to return to the people I love because of all of you. Warmth, laughing, light-hearted stories, and the joyful shine in everyone's eyes characterized the celebration that day. Ryan's amusing college tales made us laugh out loud. Grandma sat quietly and watched with a happy grin as Emma's family discussed their future plans. I realized this was the happiest celebration of my life as the evening wore on and the guests started to leave for their homes. I was surrounded by unconditional affection, not because of the cuisine or the decor. Love that money could never purchase. The past 2 years seem to have flown by. With the advent of our adorable 9-month-old daughter Ingrid, our lives are now more tranquil than before. The mood in our flat has completely changed because of her morning laughter, which gives life purpose and happiness. I've grown to value the consistent rhythm of our days. Ingrid sits in her high chair, holding her bottle, and Emma and I eat breakfast every morning at the window that looks out over the park. I always grin when I see her giggle whenever the Chicago sunlight peeks through the maple leaves. While Emma, a self-employed graphic designer, begins her day at home taking care of Ingrid, I say farewell to my wife and daughter after breakfast and go to work. I look forward to spending time with my family in the evenings after a hard day of meetings and sales reports. I take Ingrid in my arms and kiss her forehead first, inhaling the gentle, delightful aroma that only infants possess. In our tiny kitchen, where Emma's laughter melds with the sizzling cookware and Ingrid's chattering from her playchair, we prepare dinner together. We normally wind up watching a movie on the couch at the end of those evenings. I held Ingrid when she fell asleep. On weekends, when work isn't too busy, we frequently take the drive to see Grandma Carol. We eat dinner together and spend time reciting old tales. After the restraining order, I believed I had severed all communication with my parents and Katie. However, the doorbell abruptly rang one weekend afternoon as I was playing with Ingrid in the living room. I was astounded to see all 3 of them standing there as I peered through the peephole. They were ancient and worn as I opened the door. It was Katie who was ill this time. I once fought a terrible brain cancer, and she had it. An unmistakable indication that this illness is genuinely inherited. In spite of all that they had done, something shook me when I learned that my sister had the same ailment. Katie and my parents fell to their knees before me, apologizing for their errors and pleading for $350,000 to assist with her medical expenses. It was difficult for me to watch them kneel in front of me. They fell silent when I requested them to stand up and then questioned them directly. Have the three of you forgotten what happened 2 years ago when I came to ask for just $35,000? I told them to go and threatened to contact the police if they continued to disturb us, not wanting to prolong the situation. I was still quite saddened as I watched them go into despair. Grandma asked me to look into what had happened, even though I knew I had made the proper choice. Katie and I visited the hospital that same day, when it was confirmed that she was in fact sick. She asked the hospital to let my parents know that she had paid the entire $350,000 for Katie's treatment. I nodded silently as she told me on the drive home, "Patrick, you were right to refuse to help them because they once refused to help you." She continued a few seconds later, saying, "But Katie is still my granddaughter. I have to help her." I said, "Thank you for understanding, Grandma." She nodded and smiled, her eyes glowing. Grandma's actions served as a reminder to me once more that true love is capable of forgiving, even in cases where justice has already been done. My father drove to Katie's residence that evening after learning that Grandma had covered the $350,000 cost of her therapy. He pleaded to see her as he stood at the door and kept ringing the bell. He fell on his knees on the front steps as soon as Grandma opened the door, and he murmured in a stifled voice. Grandma Carol showed no emotion at all, but she looked down at her son and kneeled at her feet, saying, "Thank you, Mom, for saving Katie. I'm sorry. I've been thinking you were unfair to me all this time." After giving him a chilly look for a few moments, she stated, "Go home," in a stern, unflinching voice. Grandma told me what had happened, and I realized that some things in life cannot be forgiven, no matter how sorry you are. "Don't let me see your face again," she said, slamming the door shut. My father was left alone, still kneeling in the darkness of the Chicago night. Grandma showed me that true love is unconditional, even in the face of pain and betrayal, and I was incredibly grateful for her unconditional love after everything she did. I hope Katie will visit her when she gets well and express her gratitude to the woman who saved her life when the family was no longer able to pay. We often confuse blood family with soul family. Real family isn't defined by shared DNA but by love, sacrifice, and unwavering loyalty. Sometimes strangers become our true family. I'm not sharing this story to place blame or speak poorly of my family. Everyone makes their own decisions and must live with the consequences of those choices. Perhaps this experience will help her understand what true love and sacrifice mean. Life has taught me that true love always comes back to you, and selfishness always has a price. Live in a way that honors the love you're given. That's the end of my story. Even though people who are our blood relatives may feel like strangers, what matters most is identifying and clinging to those who truly love us. Before I go, I want to ask you all a question. If you were my grandmother and Katie was very sick, would you have spent $350,000 to save her the way my grandma did? I would really like to know what you think, so please leave your thoughts in the comments below and remember to subscribe to the channel and enable notifications so that you can follow us in future stories, each of which teaches us a valuable life lesson.